Alright guys, today we're going to make doors open on their own through scripting, and this is a very desirable thing to do where you might want to open a door from afar without having the player interact with it, or maybe just slam it open in front of them or slam it closed, even though closing is a lot easier since there's just a single line that can do that. But when it comes to opening, it can be a little tricky. There are a few things you need to make note of, but there's not that much script to it, so it shouldn't be too hard to do if I show you how, and if you don't know. So I have made a little demonstration here that should show you kind of how I have it and how I am going to show you how to make. You can do it a little differently, where you can change how fast it opens and how far it opens, but otherwise this is mostly how it is. And the most important thing to make note of when you're making this is what direction the door is. So whether it's opening in that way, that way, that way, or that way. So basically x, z, negative x, and negative z. You need to make note of that because that's going to affect the code a little bit, since it has to do with push force in coordinates. But otherwise, anyways, so I'm going to show you this little demonstration I have here, where as soon as I step into this area right here, it's going to slowly open the door and creak it. So that's how I have it right now, and that's how the door opens very slowly. You can open it even more if you'd like. Although these doors, if you have this located in the middle, it kind of gets stuck right there, so it doesn't open anymore. But that's just a door frame. But anyways, you can open the door as much as you want, and how fast, and the sound you can adjust as well. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for the demonstration. And if you think this is okay and you want to know how to do this, then you can follow along to the tutorial that I'm going to jump over to right now. Alright, so let's do this. And first of all, I'm just going to note that if you're using a Windows computer, you can still use this tutorial because it's done the exact same way on Windows as on a Mac. And if you're missing any of the files that I'm going to be using, you can download some of the essential ones in my description. I will have them linked there, as well as all the script that I'm going to be using, so that you can just copy it if you'd like, although I personally prefer if you write it down yourself because it's a lot easier to learn that way. But anyways, let's start by navigating to our Amnesia main directory. Since I have it on Steam, it should be right here, under this path right here. On a Mac, it's under Library, Application Support, Steam, and all the way up to Amnesia. If you're using retail, I believe it's in Applications or Application Support. I'm not sure about the retail, I'm afraid, but you should be able to know where that folder is, the main folder where you have all the files and the editors. If you've been making tutorials before, no, videos, no, custom story content. I completely messed that up. Anyways, let's just navigate to the custom story folder right here. I have this example custom story that I used in the example right now. I have used it all the way up to this point with all the maps I've been using so far, but these are the only notable files for this video. Autodoor, the map file, and the script file. If you don't have a script file, you can create one with Notepad or TextEdit. Just make sure the extension is .hps and it's a clean text format. It's not a rich text or anything like that. Or you could just, of course, download mine or copy it from somewhere else. So I'm going to just quickly open up the map that I have here with the level editor that you also should know where is. If you don't, you should just install the tools. You probably have them already though, but I'm going to open up this autodoor.map file right here, and this is the one I used in the example. So basically there's nothing really in this map that you need to do. So the only things in this map would be the door itself, a light value, which is right there, an area, and the spawn point. So I'm just gonna show you that this area, the only thing I did with the area was place it down and name it area door. So actually I'm just gonna delete the area, delete the door. So now the map is completely empty, but you don't really need to do anything with the entities that you're gonna place because everything is done through the scripting. So let's start with placing the door down. Going to Entities, Door, and since I have an arched doorway, I want to use the arched door. And now I'm going to place it down. So let's see. I'm going to place it about there. Alright, but at this time it's going to be opening. Yeah, it's going to be opening the same way as last time, but I'll show you a little bit on how to actually open it later, because that could be probably the trickiest part, but shouldn't be too hard. And after you place it down, you probably want to give it a name so it's easier to reference in the code. It can be named whatever you like, but I'm just going to keep it very simple and name it door. So so whenever you see door in the script, you're going to know that it's talking about the door entity, and not just like arch_door or whatever. So I'm going to save that, and now I'm going, well, actually I don't need to save that yet. I'm going to place the script area as well. Let's just click and place a very small one right here. The area can be whatever you want. You don't even need to use an area to trigger this event. You can use pretty much anything to trigger it, but I'm going to use an area because they're pretty simple to use and to demonstrate with. So, but of course you can use timers to execute this, and you can use pretty much anything. It just needs to be executed in some way. You can even do it on the very start of the map, but that would probably be less noticeable because the player has just started and isn't exactly aware of what's going on. But that's of course up to you. So I'm going to name this area just area door, so that whenever you see area door in the script, you're going to know that I'm talking about the area. So we have the area right there. It's going to be invisible in the game, but since it's right between the spawn point and the door, you should I should know where to walk to actually collide with it. We're going to make a collision event. When the player collides with the area, the door is going to open. So after all these or these two little additions, I'm just going to save the map right there and minimize it, because we're done with everything in the map. Everything else is done in the script, and if I open it now, you're going to see how the script looks so far, and that is everything that we're going to be doing. And I'm probably going to wipe all this and show you how to write it from scratch. So let's start from scratch here with a very simple void onStart function. And you probably already know what this thing is, and you probably already have it in your script file, because it is probably the most essential one to have. It's not required, but it's where everything starts to go around. So it's ran when the map is started for the first time, so from here you can add checks that will happen later on. So the one I'm going to be using is the Collide Callback. So I'm going to open up the engine scripts page that I have right here. So this one has a list. I have this linked in the description too. This one has a list of all the functions that you can use in this game. For example, void onStart right here. But I'm going to use Command F and search up Collide. Add entity Collide Callback. And this one I'm going to copy everything from here on and on, everything except the void part in this little section, and copy that, and I'm going to minimize that and paste it into void onStart. So it's a rather large line, but you're going to replace everything inside the parentheses with your own names and parameters. So the first one is, since it says string as parent name, the first thing determines what type it is. Since it's a string, it always has double quotes on the sides, so you want to put quotes on there. And this is the parent name, basically the first entity. And if you set this to player, that'll be the first entity. The other one, the child, is the second entity. So when the first entity collides with the second entity, this is going to be executed. So for example, player collides with area door. So when they collide, it's going to launch the third parameter in this one, which is string function. So you want to put quotes on that as well. And here is going to be whatever name you want this function to be named. So I'm going to call it, let's see, just event door. I'm going to put it in there. It's not the event itself, but it's where it starts. So I'm going to call it event door. You can name it whatever you want. The next one is a Boolean, and delete on collide. And Booleans are either true or false. So you want to put it to true or false. Since it deletes on collide, if you put this to true, that means that this function will only happen once. So even if you go out of the area and come back, it'll not happen again. If you put it to false, it will. And the last one, int states. Int is a number, and the state it could be 0, 1, or -1, depending on when you're entering, exiting, or both the area. Like entering and exiting the area, or both. So I'm just going to put it a 1, so when you're entering the area, and that's going to launch the event door function as soon as these two collide. And yeah, so we're going to have to create that event now. So I'm going to do void event door, Alright, so this name has to match the one you put up there, and then you're going to put the parameters that you're going to be needing to define this function as a function that, or as a block that this function can recognize. So you're going to need a few parameters that it can reference. So the parameters are always listed on the page directly below. It says callback syntax, void myfunc. Myfunc is in our case event door, and then it says string as parent, string child, and string state, or int state. And you want to just paste those in right there. So that'll just basically reference the parent, will reference the player, child will reference the door area, and the state will reference the last parameter. So basically on runtime these are replaced with that, so basically it says player right here, so you can reference as parent and it will say player. It's a little more advanced, you don't really need to worry that much about it. I'm going to explain it as much as I can when we're going to be using it, but for the most part you can just ignore it, just make sure that it is there. And inside this event here, we want to, first of all, we want to make sure the door doesn't close directly after. So I'm going to just search up door right here. Well, actually that's a little short, but okay, doors. Under the doors section, you can do set swing door closed. Swing door are the doors you can grab and swing. The level doors are not like that. So you want to put that in there. It has string as name, the name of the door. In our case it's just called door. Door, like that. Boolean closed, false. It's not closed. Boolean effects, false. Do not use effects. It's just going to be easier to open the door when you have it not closed. And after that you also want to add the it should be directly below here, set swing door disable auto close, which makes the door not close directly after you open it. So same thing here, door as the name, and Boolean, this one has to be true because it's true, it's going to disable, yes. And yeah, then we have those. I'm just going to put a little space. Now we also want to play the creaking sound effect on the door as it opens, so we can do that by using the play sound entity, play sound at entity function, this one right here. Want to copy it, it's quite long as well, paste it in right there. First of all, the sound name, you can put two quotes here and leave them empty, but for the most part you can do that, but in this case you don't want to, because or else it'll loop forever. So you're gonna have to give it a reference name that you can use to stop this later on. So I'm just gonna call it let's call it creak. Alright, and the sound file, and now this one I'm gonna have to look. Alright, so the sound file is joint underscore door underscore move underscore special. It's a name of a sound file in the Amnesia root directory in the sounds folder. The extension is .snt. And so basically this is a file. You can navigate to this file. You can find it in the let's see, a little further back, yeah, in the sounds folder right here in Amnesia. You can find it inside here if you look for it, and basically that is the sound that we want to use. It's the creaking sound basically. So next one is the entity we want to play it on, and if you put, instead of putting quotes in this one, you can put as parent. Basically what that does is that it references to this thing. As I said earlier, on runtime this is replaced with player. Oh, actually not as parent, I meant as child, because we want it to reference the door. Actually that would not work because that would reference the area door, so in this case we want to use just put double quotes and write in door. Sometimes you can do it differently by putting it as parent or as child or as entity or whatever it says in the parameters, and that will replace it with what is inside the quotes that they are referencing, which makes the code more compact and more flexible if you're gonna combine it with other functions. But in this case it didn't exactly work because it's playing the sound at the area door. We wanted to play at the door, so just put the quotes and put door in there instead. And float fade time. This is how fast it's going to be fading. So I'm just going to put that to, let's put it to 1. Alright, and the last one is a Boolean save sound, and we're going to put this down to false because or else it'll remember the state, and that is not exactly necessary in this case, so just going to put it to false, which will make it it's a little more advanced. You can look it up what it does, but in this case we don't need it. Yeah, so that would be the sound effect done. We're also going to need a timer to stop the sound effect, so I'm going to add timer. And this timer is going to be, it doesn't exactly need a name, but we're going to put it to 2 seconds. The first one, if you didn't catch that, that is the internal name of the timer. If you put 2 quotes and no name, that will mean the timer has no name. It's often a good idea to give it a name, but if you don't need to, I usually just leave it out. If it's a one-time timer, but if it's going to be used several times, I usually give it a name so that I can stop it. And the third parameter is a string of the event that is going to be ran after 2 seconds. So I'm going to call it timer stop sound. Alright, and now outside of this block I'm going to create that. So void timer stop sound, like that. And the string parameters are string and in as timer. I say it a little fast sometimes. Anyway, so that's the function itself. You can find the function itself on the engine scripts page. I use it a lot so I remember it, but if you don't, you can find it on the page, and you can also find the parameters there just like we did on this one. So you don't need to remember this or anything. You can just copy it from there if you'd like. So that'll basically make so that after 2 seconds it's going to run this thing and everything that's inside here. So what we want to run inside here is stop sound, and with the parameter, single parameter of the name, which is creak. So actually there's 2 parameters. The second one is how fast it's going to be fading out. So I'm going to put it to 0.4. So it'll be fading out. If you put it to 0, it's going to be instantly stopped. Put it to 0.5 or 4, it's going to like fade out. And that is basically it for that. Now, the last part about this function is the actual moving of the door. We made it possible to move by using this so that it won't close right after, but now we're going to make a function that's going to actually move the door. So first off, I'm going to make a timer function to actually move it. But to execute this timer, I'm just going to use this. So basically what you can do here, you can add timer again, and all of this, but since it's going to be executed instantly, instead of putting this time to 0, which you can do, I'm gonna do a little something else, which is a bit more advanced, but I like to do it because it's more compact. Basically what is going to be done is it's going to put the name of the timer, and then in a single parameter the timer internal name. So it's basically like as if you're copying this part off the engine scripts page, pasting it in, and then that would be the name of the function, and you would replace this with your own like string timer. But before we do that, we're gonna have to make the timer so we know what the name is. So I'm just gonna put this little space between here and void, let's see, you call it timer move door, and string and in as timer, yes, timer, like that. And then we have that function as well, which is the same. So you actually, in this case, let's just copy this one and paste it below. Usually I like using the other one, but since it is a little more advanced and this is a somewhat simple tutorial, I'm gonna just keep it simple and just do it the very basic way. Not 3, just put it to 0 and it'll be executed instantly. And you want to put this same name in this one, so it's going to be executing this. But basically what you could do instead was to put timer move door and then parentheses at the end of it with what is inside here. We're going to actually need a name for this one because it's going to be a little more involved. So I'm going to call it actually you need to call it door, or just be sure to name it the same as your entity. So actually yeah, so you need to name it door. I was thinking of the as child again, but that wouldn't work since area door. but you need to name it door. Make sure it's named the same as the door entity, because we're going to use the as timer in this one. It's not required again, but I like to do it this way, as I said. Now in this one, this is where the things actually happen. This is probably the trickiest part of the tutorial, which isn't too bad, but it's a little more than what we've done so far. So first of all, we want an if statement, and this is going to be a little check to begin this function, which is going to determine whether this function is going to happen or not. So do if parentheses get local var int. This is a function that returns a value that you have defined yourself. It's a variable, an integer variable, and it's local, so it's only in this map. And this one is going to check that if get local var int, it needs some parameters there as well, so we're going to need a name. So we're gonna, if we haven't actually made this one yet, but we're gonna make it in a sec, so I'm just gonna call it it doesn't really matter what you call it. I'm just gonna call it var door, variable door. So if variable door equals 10. Now this last number is determining how far the door is going to open. So if you put it to 15, that is going to open it 90 degrees. You can't really, most doors you can't really open more than 90 degrees, but if you put it to 10, it's going to open 2/3 of the door. So I'm going to put it to 10, and after that I'm going to write return semicolon. And basically what that does is that if this variable door has reached 10, it's going to not do anything more in this function. So return basically means it's going to stop doing everything that it comes after until this one. So if there are a lot of things between return and the ending block of this one, that's going to be ignored when the return command is called. But that's only going to happen in this case if variable door is equal to 10. So after that one, we want to add the variable. So there is a function called add local var int, which is similar. Actually, let me just demonstrate by going to the page. Var int. At the very top, almost in the variables, you see set local var int, add local var int, and get local var int. Basically these are just variables you can use to make your game flow a bit better, and in this case we're going to use them. You can also use the very primitive version, but this one is probably a little easier. And yeah, so now in this one we're going to need two parameters. We're going to need the name and the value it's going to add. So just put quotes as the name and make sure it's the same name, var door, same name. And the variable that's going to be adding is 1, so it's just going to be adding 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 on up until 10, where it stops. Now after this one we're going to add a timer which makes everything repeat. So in this case, if you add a timer with the same name as the timer that is executing it, it'll be looping and looping and looping until it stops. And that is why this variable here is here, to stop that timer at some points, or else it'll repeat indefinitely. So in this case, let's add timer, and we want the name to be the same as this timer. So if you put as timer in there, the name of this timer is going to be the same as the timer that is currently calling it, and this one is referencing to timer move door as timer, which is this one. So basically it references all the way over there and makes this one replace with door on runtime. So you want to do door there, and the time between each of these little ticks is going to be a very short time. It's going to be 0.03, and that is barely time at all. It's just going to quickly snap another timer right here, and of course the last one needs to be the same name in the quotes, so that it adds the timer with the same name and with the same timer, so that basically this makes so that it passes the little check here as well. which makes well, actually we haven't made the thing that determines the as timer part yet, but the reason why the timer needs to be named the same as the door is going to be the last thing that we're going to be adding, which comes after now, which is add prop impulse. It is actually add prop force, which is going to be pushing the door. So if you go on this page, add prop force, right here, this add prop force function, it has a few parameters, not that many, but you want to paste that in right here. And this is where the trickiest part of the tutorial is. It's not very tricky, but unless you thought this was a bit tricky, then I guess that could be a little trickier. But string name. So the name of the entity that's going to be pushed is the door. So if you put as timer in there, it's going to be replacing the entity name with the name of the timer, which is door in this case. If you don't want to use the as timer part, you can just replace this part right here with quote door, or the name of the door. That works too, actually. It's a little simpler, but it's a very useful thing to know if you can use this as timer part. Now, these are the coordinates of how it's going to be pushed. So I'm going to put x to 0, y to 0, and z to 0, and I'm going to add them just later right now, actually, after the last one. This one is string coord system, and you don't really need to worry about that. What that means is just the coordinate system, what kind of system it's going to use to calculate the force pushing. So just put quotes and world, and if you put the world text in there, you can just, I don't even know what else you can use except for world, but just put world in there and ignore what it means. It doesn't really matter. So now these three are going to be depending on the direction of the door. So if you open up the level editor again, we're going to be pushing it well, depending on in what direction it's facing. It has different, I'm not exactly sure what to do with if it's facing diagonally, but I would assume you have to combine two coordinates. But since it's standing like this right now, if you look if you have the translate selected, you can see the three arrows. You don't need to worry about the y character, because you're not going to push it up. You're only going to push it in the direction of either x or z. So since the red arrow is x and the blue arrow is z, if you want to push it in the direction we are pushing it this time, which is the opposite direction of the red arrow, this way, that means we're going to push it in negative x. So that means we're going to put it on the first number with a negative in front, and we're going to put the value 70. And that is going to be pushing the door. But if your door is located like this, in this case it would be opening in positive z, you want to put the number 70 on the last one without the negative. So you want to put it there. So that a little depends on the direction of the door, how to push it, or else if you get this wrong, the door will not open. So make sure that the door is actually located in the correct spot. Now that is actually everything we need to do for this tutorial, and we're gonna do a little run to see if everything is working. But let me just recap what we did here. Was that whenever this timer right here, which is ran instantly when you collide with the area, whenever this is ran, it's first going to check if this value is 10. So this is important why this needs to be at the top, because or else it doesn't really work as well. But this, if after 10 times, after this timer, since it repeats every time, after the timer has repeated 10 times, which means it has added 10 var_door variables, it's going to run this and basically set ignore everything behind here, and since it also ignores the timer that repeats it, it's not going to repeat. So it's only going to be pushing the door a little bit and a little bit and a little bit over the course of 10 variable points. And 10 variable points is determining how how far it's going to be. If you mess around with this number 70, that's going to determine how much each point is going to be pushing it. So if you put it up, then it's going to be pushing faster. But if you put it up, you also want to put the value 10 down, or else it will not be pushing it. Like if you have it still 10 and this more, it'll be pushing it for just as much time, but it'll be pushing it longer, so it will not be 2/3 of the door. But you can mess around with those two numbers if you'd like. Those are the most essential ones that you could do to define or redefine this little event right here. And also, as I said, add prop force is going to be ran every time up until the 10th time. So it's going to be ran 10 times, and then it's not going to be ran, so it's just pushing it over and over. So now that we've saved this script file, you can open up Amnesia again, and we're going to do a little test. So I have a full conversion mod loaded, so that's why it looks a little different from yours, but custom stories work the exact same. So we are back in game, and we can just step into a little small area where we have here, and the door is slowly opening like that. And I hope that's what you were looking for, and that is it for this video. I appreciate that you watched it through the end, and if you liked it, I would really appreciate it if you would like the video. It motivates me to make more of these tutorials. Other than that, that would be everything, and I will thank you for watching, and I will see you later.